Hey guys, what is up? We have an open challenge on the board. It's a 30-minute unrated game. My opponent's rated 1229, so 300 points lower rated than me. Okay, so let's just go through it's playing very quickly. Right, move number one. Good move, opens up this bishop, opens up this queen, right? It's aggressive, it controls the center. Very important, right? Black does the exact same thing, controlling squares in the center. This is the center, so we're each controlling one square. We've each opened up queen and bish. He now plays again an aggressive move, which attacks my pawn on e5, which is undefended, right? So I've now responded, bringing out my knight to defend the pawn. So and now we have the Spanish game, or the Ruy Lopez. Okay, so what he's doing here is he's attacking the defender of the pawn. So the idea is, if he gets to take there, I have to recapture, and you must recapture with the d pawn in this instance, right? And then he would be free to take the pawn and gain an advantage. So I'm going to play the janish. This is my normal repertoire. Right, now the reason why you recapture with the d pawn is if this knight captures here, you need to be able to come to d4 with your queen, attacking both the pawn and the knight. Okay, the knight would then retreat. However, if takes, you now have the option of pushing e4 Vienna style, and this is the whole point of the gambit. So we've given up a pawn at this point, but in return, we've won ourselves a turn, we've won ourselves a tempo, right? And look, since the e-pawn moved, or moved one, we can now recapture there anyway, right? Knight retreats. Now, it's important before you just go ahead, if I just go ahead and recapture now, queen comes out to here, then my bishop, I suppose, could retreat. That would also win a tempo, wouldn't it? The alternative is knight to here, preventing the queen from coming to h5 with check. So bishop here, if queen h5 check, bishop g6 hits the queen and defends this pawn and is positioned on a defended square. Likewise though, this knight coming out, I think knights before bishops in general, also defends the pawn, also controls the centre, and we still have bishop takes f5. I think that's okay. We've been going through, by the way, Logical Chess Move by Move by Irving Chernev, written, I think, in the 1950s. I may even post a video of one of our sessions on this book. It's an awesome book. Somebody put in chat recently, I'm just going to take this pawn, by the way. I think I can't see any excuse not to. It gets me a step closer to castling queenside if I wish. The only other option would be somehow to develop this bishop, and I don't really see an argument for that. So now this pawn is super well defended. Okay, so yeah, in Chess Bootcamp Live, I've been running Sunday sessions on this book, and it's a really good book. Yeah. So somebody posted in the comments recently, you've got a bunch of books behind you. What chess books do you recommend? Quite honestly, I would probably say I'd get My System by Aaron Nimzovich, which is just a really good basic primer. I think everybody should read that book. Right? Every chess professional has read that book. But this is really, really good. And what it does is he takes a bunch of classic games, obviously from before the 1950s, and he walks you through the games, explaining all the logic behind every move, good or bad. Right? And they are classic games, so it's really entertaining. So what we're doing in Chess Bootcamp Live on these Sundays is working through these games. So we'll talk it through. I will narrate Chernev's own comments, and we'll discuss it, and we'll discuss other lines, and we'll explore it together as a group. Right? It's a lot of fun. It's very, very instructive, and also at the end of that, then I reset the board. And I get the group to play through as the winning player, and to try and remember not only what moves were played, but why those moves were played, from a master's perspective, having understood the logic behind each move. And it's a really, really good way to learn. So if you want a chess book, all right, you could, doesn't matter, you could be 300 or 1300 rated, really, really good. Or 1800 rated, I don't care. You will learn a lot from that book. Anyway, back to the game. So, my number one thought right now is, I want to develop, I want to control more of the board. I also would like to get my king safe. Now, my king has two ways to get behind a pawn. Maybe slightly more solid on this side. And that would be my tendency. We have a semi-open file on the F file, we have a semi-open file on the D file. Right, this pawn's well defended. I'm inclined to put my bishop on D6. I'm also thinking, that is C5 a better place for the bishop? On D6, it's eyeing up this pawn here, right? Then I might have options of going in with my knight and causing trouble. Might also prompt him to move that pawn, which we saw in the Chernev game yesterday. It's actually game 1 in the book. So there are merits to that move. This one pins this pawn, right? Am I concerned about D4? I'm going to play this. I'm going to move it here. Then I'm thinking my queen wants to go somewhere. D7 is an idea. So while it's my opponent's turn to think, Jensen, go and nibble somewhere else. Oi, not bad. Oi. Yeah. Yeah, while it's my opponent's turn, I want to be thinking about strategy. Okay, so he's moved his rook here, which is not a bad idea. It's a semi-open file from white's perspective because there's only pawns of one colour, but it's my pawn, right? So he's thinking about breaking through, and he very likely want to push d3 at some point and challenge this pawn. Okay, and if I take, then there's discovered check ideas. So what I'm thinking is, I want to move my queen, and I think it is d7. I think d7 is the move. And then long castles. Or I could immediately castle short and then put my rook on e8 on the next turn. Right, now what we do is we evaluate those different candidate moves. So this is the slower option. I could castle immediately and then second move put my rook on there. So let's say I castle, he pushes this. My king's already out the pin. So I could capture. And his queen can't recapture because I'm looking at that with the bishop, right? So if I castle d3, e takes d3, it's going to have to be pawn takes d3. And then white ends up with an isolated queen's pawn in IQP. And that is a positional advantage for me because his only central pawn is weakened by the fact that it has no neighbours to, no wingman to protect it. It's an isolated pawn. Cannot be defended by a pawn. Therefore, for the entire rest of the game, that pawn will have to be defended by pieces. And that's not ideal, right? You don't really want to be using pieces to do a pathetic little job like looking after pawns. Of course, pawns are important, but what you want to do is you want to be able to defend all your stuff with using the least possible material, right? So if that's like, if your king can protect all your pawns in the endgame, great. If a rook can defend your two rearmost pawns of pawn chains, great. So it's not that defending pawns with pieces is a bad thing. You just want to use the least possible amount of force to defend so that you can use more of your forces to make life hard for your opponent, okay? Now the other option is like queen here, then pawn push it forward, then I could castle. If he takes, I'm going to do that, right? Because I like the fact of putting my rook straight onto this d file, which is semi-open from my perspective in that it's only got a white pawn on it. So if he pushes now, right, I castle, I've got a rook on here and a queen on here. If his pawn takes there, for example, I can take his king. Right, so work this through. d3, okay, castles. My rook is now on d8, okay? If he takes this pawn, I don't have to react. I can actually win material because I've then got my rook, my queen, my bishop all in line. My bishop can take on h2 with check. Let's say king takes. Then I can take the queen. Okay? Right? If he takes here, that is a problem. Okay, now you see it. And these are the kinds of sequences that only appear, if you take the time to go, well, if this, then what? If that, then what? Okay? So now it looks like he's attacking my bishop. But bishop takes h2, king's in check, right? Queen can't do anything. Let's say king takes bishop, queen takes queen, rook takes queen, rook takes rook, and I believe we have won a pawn and a rook for the cost of one bishop. We also, though, need to think about this now. I could now take the pawn immediately, like with my knight or my bishop, and I still have this idea. This idea is still on, and that is a factor that you see much more as you get more experienced at chess. Beginner will go, I see something, grab it, like an infant. Oh, I see that, I'm going to pick it up and put it in my mouth to see what it is, right? But developing this appreciation of time in games is an important skill. So let's think this through. Bishop takes there, king takes. I take bishop, rook takes, I take rook, he takes bishop. So I've lost both bishops for a rook and a pawn, and that's 6-6, but it's actually worse for me. On the other hand, I have slightly opened up his king, but I don't see any reason to do that. It's a clever idea, it's a clever tactical sequence, but it's not necessary. So I'm going to take this pawn first with my bishop, and this idea now is still on. And if we play this tactic now, okay, with my bishop now unattacked, then I win a rook and a pawn for one bishop, and that is definitely worth doing, definitely in my favour. And again, that I have to thank Chernev for inspiring me a bit to slow down in the thinking and to start to appreciate just how much subtle complexity there can be in an apparently simple move. Yeah, okay, now takes, king takes, I take queen, rook takes queen. Now, but this bishop's defended, you see, by the knight. So I think we're on. But let's double check, okay? Rook takes, king takes. I take queen, rook takes queen. I take rook, knight recaptures. Oh, hang on. So I don't win the rook, it's just a trade of rooks, hang on. Okay, yeah, this changes things, right? Does it not? I take pawn. So I'm up a pawn, but down a bishop. So -2. Trades. Then I don't have to trade rooks, but I'm just -2. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the bishop the hell out of dodge, I believe. So let's retreat the bishop. So we spotted a tactic that in a blitz game you might have banged out thinking, clever me, this is going to cost my opponent 30 seconds to figure it out, okay? Now, but in real life, it's not quite on the cards. And that's why we calculate. Okay, so he's now attacking my bishop. I could move the bishop, for example, and then our queens are facing off, and we could end up trading queens. If I take the bishop, and knight takes, he's then looking at my other bishop, that's not the end of the world. I don't really want to trade queens, that's my concern. So, but if I allow him to take me, I can actually undouble my pawns, and then my pawns end up with this structure, which is not too bad. And my king can go, for example, to b8, and I've got 4 on the king side and 2 pawns on the queen side. He's got 3 and a 3, so it's kind of quite equal. I don't want to trade queens at this point. I could even just put my king on b8 now. What else do we have? His knights are actually quite good. His knights are exerting pretty good control over the centre here. They're controlling quite a few squares. I have the bishop pair as well, and I would like to maintain that if I can. But my bishop is in a way kind of pinned. If I don't want to trade queens, my bishop's kind of pinned. It could move bishop here. Threaten to take knight or pin the knight on the rook. If we trade queens, it's not the end of the world. It means there's an open file and I control it. I could play here. Knight takes, bishop takes, but then my bishop's undefended. And it's quite happy there. It's all right there for a minute. I could play my rook to f8 or e8. Okay, I'm going to play rook h to e8 because this is an open file and I would like to stake a bit of a claim over that file. Alright, now could capture the bishop straight away. Could capture with a queen. Then if queens are traded off, I don't know. Actually, if the queens are traded off, there's no one defending that pawn there that I am attacking. If I take with a pawn, I restore my pawn structure, and also potentially now I'm the only one with a pawn on the 2 central files, yeah? Okay, now he's moved his knight. And he might have ideas about trading rooks. Both his knights are now on dark squares, so one idea is to push my pawn to d5. I'm still eyeing up this pawn. I'd love to grab that pawn. That would be a real treat. Now, don't want to go there because I don't want to trade knights and screw up my pawns again. I'm going to play d5. Just takes this square away from the knights. It means that neither of his knights can now go to that square. Where they could have done before, it's defended by rook. Oh, it's actually attacked 3 times now, so they couldn't really have gone there anyway. Yeah, I don't buy that move. There's something wrong about that move. This, if knight takes, I've got bishop takes. That's not bad. This is an important knight. It's a defensive knight. This knight is now a poor piece. I think his idea must be that he's going to go in there. I could play knight here, which covers that square. Then he may trade off. If his knight comes in there, and this is another thing, right, that you really need to work into your game. If the knight comes in there, how unhappy am I about that? Well, I'm not unhappy, you know. I'll put my queen there, attack the knight. He can't take this pawn. He can't go there because I'm attacking it with rook and queen. So it's like, well, yes, I see his idea. I don't have to stamp out his idea unless it's a good idea. And quite honestly, I'm not sure it is. So, what? How about this? Rook takes rook, queen takes, bang. That'll do. And now he's in check. Okay, his only 2 legal moves are knight blocks and queen takes. So obviously queen takes. Now I can grab this pawn, can't I? Now I attack this knight. Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. And that was a simple tactic. That's like a 2-move tactic. Knight is under attack. Yep, he comes here. Right, the first thing I'm thinking about is if I move my queen, which, by the way, I am going to do, right? Do I need to worry about my defences? So, that's covered by rook and knight. Happy days, that's fine. I think I might just stick my queen here. So she defends there. All good. He might bring his queen in and, he might bring his knight in if he wanted to and attack my rook, but then I pin it, so can't see a problem with that. He can't go there to attack my queen, and he can't go here to attack my queen. So anytime you put a piece one diagonal away from a knight, you have to be conscious that there are potentially up to 2 ways for that knight to pivot round with an attack. But in this case, it's not good. He goes there, king takes him. Yeah. It's not a huge surprise. Now, I know that with this configuration of knight and king, there's no way that the knight can move with check. My queen is also defended by the rook, so I don't have to be too concerned about that. I could bring my bishop here, with a bit of a barrage there, effectively pinning this knight, because if the knight ever moves, I could, unless it moves here, I could capture on h2 with check, and remove one of the important pawns around my opponent's king. His queen is actually also undefended on that square, so b6 is a thought. Attack the pinned piece. Right? So he thinks that he's almost setting up a discovery, but he can't move the knight with check, because wherever the knight goes, right, the knight needs to be on the same colour square as my king if it's going to be able to move with check. Because anywhere this knight moves to, it changes colour squares, right? So, and then once it's on a light square, it's only looking at dark squares. My king's on a light square. So it would actually take this knight 2 moves to give check. You see what I mean? So b6 is a thought. b6, I don't think he's got any way to defend the knight. The only way to add another defender, because the knight can't move, yeah? Can't move with check. So b6, let's do it. And he played that move quite quickly. Well, 27 seconds he took over that. And he's used less than 5 minutes. Right? He's a pawn down. He's used less than 5 minutes of a 30-minute game. And he knows he's against the stronger player, so... Ah, that's not bad. I did not see that. I did not see that. So now, if I take... That's clever. So his knight could pivot and defend his own queen. Good idea. Well done. Well done. Right. The issue now is, do we go into an endgame? Do we take the queens off the board? I move my bishop, maybe back there. I'm a pawn up, and I've got a 4-on-2 majority here. So then I use my king. So I think we do. I think we have a strong position. My bishop, I need to think, where does my bishop want to go? And I'm drawn to this diagonal, and I'll tell you for why. Something like this, because it stops the king from getting out of his hole. So as soon as the queens come off the board now, right, we only have 3 pieces apart from my kings left. Okay. And my thought is that I want to centralise my king and particular guard this d pawn, because this d pawn is a passed pawn. What does that mean? It means that there's no pawn on my enemy's side in front of it that can disrupt or interrupt its journey to promotion. So I'm going to bring my bishop around here with the idea of putting the bishop there, guarding that square, and that's a key square. You have to think about what's critical. Okay, he attacks my bishop. I just step out of the way. He attacks my bishop again. Oh, have I got my bishop trapped? Have I got my bishop trapped? Can't go there. King, knight, knight, pawn, pawn, knight. So, okay. What I do is I push c5. If he takes my bishop, I take his knight. That does actually drop this pawn. But I still have a passer. Still have a passed pawn. Okay, I didn't think that through properly. can even pre-move the recapture if I wanted to, yeah. So he should take here, because he wins the pawn back. I would then have to lift my rook, maybe propose a trade of rooks, or I just keep my rook behind Dave the Deep. Oh, no. No, this was not good. That was not the appropriate response. Okay, a couple of issues, right? His rook's no longer looking at this. His knight is completely in the wrong side of the board. This was a mistake. This is definitely, I would say this is a mistake. The computer will say that. He should have traded and won his pawn back, taken off the only bishop off the board, right? Which, when you get into an endgame with a nice open board like this, bishops and their long-range high-speed potential becomes very strong. So I'm going to drop my bishop back here and keep it on this diagonal. But basically, this is now the Dave show. It's off you go, Dave. Fulfill your ambition of becoming a queen. Okay, I'm not sure about that move. Off you go, Dave. Can't move his knight there. It's covered by bish. What's he going to do? He's going to end up probably having to stick his rook in front of Dave, or his knight will come here. So as soon as Dave moves forward, his knight can come here with the idea of putting his knight in front of there. And what's that? You know, what's he done? What he's done is he's then using a knight to stop a pawn. And yes, it might be an essential thing. Now, if I push here, he pushes and my bishop is ugly, so... and the other thing you have to think is, well, if he attacks my bishop, I just step out the way, okay? So don't run away from things that haven't happened, if you can deal with them when they happen. So I can't push the pawn because that will encourage him to do this. Then I have to move my bishop there. So I'm going to push d3 and keep the psychological pressure on my opponent. Now what he should do, I think, is take. Takes, rook takes, push. I might even do that. Keeping his pawn in front of my king, keeping his pawn, that's just a blunder. And that happens. Okay. So you see, takes here. I don't want to take, because that just lets him grab my... Well, in fact, now it's all right. Now I can even take with a knight. That's okay. Happy with that. If he moves his king here, that's a complete blunder, because this attacks the rook with a discovered check. Yeah. And now he's kind of crumbling. This is what happens. Okay. So... if Dave 3 to Dave 2, do we need to do that? Or shall we just... I'm going to move my king to get out of the pin so that my knight can take this pawn, if it wants to. My knight can then come in here, maybe guarding the promotion square, that kind of thing. Okay, he's attacking my bishop. I see you. Okay, king here. Again, you're 4 squares away from a knight. The knight can't check you, right? I'm on the wrong colour anyway. Oh, the knight's actually defending the bishop anyway, but my knight wants to take that pawn, so let's add another defender here. Now I'm attacking the pawn again. If he pushes, I might just push. It kind of makes my bishop awkward though. Okay. Now I see king and rook on the same square, on the same coloured squares, and you see this long L shape? Right? When you see that, that says knight fork. Okay? And any two of these coloured squares here, right, when there's a combination, so this is a big fat L, right? This is a 5 and 3. This is a 4 and 2. Okay? They're all knight forkable. So I'm going to push here. In fact, if I play there, it'll just force a trade of knights. Okay, I can force a trade of knights now, which is all in my interest. So this is a fork on king and knight. He has to take, and then bishop's going to recapture. Oh, hang on. If bishop recaptures, that actually interrupts the rooks, blocks the rook's defense of the pawn. So it's going to be rook recaptures. If king approaches, rook retreats. And I'll stick it on the second rank, not the first rank. Reason why is that it's defending all my rearmost pawns. So this is now a lost position for my opponent. What I want to do now is attack this rook. Now I'm going to retreat my rook first. There's no rush. Put my bishop here with a fork on rook and pawn. Got heaps of time. Bishop there. Okay, this is coming. Double attack. If his rook moves, I promote. He could take with a rook here. I take. He takes rook. I take this pawn. And now I've got two completely unopposed pawns on the king side. He's got three here. So this is the question. Do I want to trade rooks? I'm +3. So basically, we've got 4 pawns each, but I have a bishop. My bishop can actually guard all of these squares at once, which is a good thing about bishops. And I have a pawn majority on the queen side, so I ought to be able to defend. Okay, let's do this, because I think it'll be instructive. I'm thinking my bishop can probably hold all of these pawns back. So now none of these pawns can move forwards. Nor can this guy. So his king's going to move now. And when his king moves, I could push, for example, a6, b5. And I'm going to force one of my pawns past this guy. Now, he really is in a lost position now. I could even play a5, b5. And if he takes, I have a passer. I might push g6 and then bishop here. Yeah. Then now again, he can't push this pawn because I just take. He can't push this either of these because the bishop just takes it now. So now this is a really nice structure to remember in an endgame. Pawn defends bishop, bishop defends pawn, pawn h5, and now I have a indestructible structure. Right? He can push here, pawn takes. Right? There, pawn takes, there. Okay. So now it's time for Barry to join the fun. If he takes here, then Andy, the A pawn, dances over the line. If he does not take, I take him, and Barry dances up the A file for the win. Very instructive game. Okay, guys, it seems there's some internet connection problem here, but we managed to get a one position at the end of that, so I hope that's useful for all of you around the kind of 1000 to 1300 level. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.